Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, it's the end of the day too for our virtual user conference. Vrakas Blum Computer Consulting thanks everybody for attending this year to the new normal. Hate saying that, but it is what it is. This last session is on Sage inventory best practices. Just a few housekeeping things quick. Everybody is joining in mute. We did make it so you could share your screen with us, and it's great that we can see so many of you sharing today. If we can't see you live in person, it's nice to see you in a little box. During the sessions, if you have any questions at all, throw them in the chat box below and we'll address those at the end. And now for the reason that you're here. Today, we have the pleasure of introducing Kelly Kaufman, Consulting Manager of the BCC. Kelly has been with us for over 13 years. She started when she was 4 and has many years of real world end user experience before that, giving her insights from both end user and consultant. And as many of you know and have experienced, that's why she's so great at what she does. Today, she's going to be dazzling you with her extensive insight into the ever exciting world of Sage inventory. Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll just go ahead and start right away. Welcome everybody to the meeting today. Hope everybody is healthy and well as can be at this time in our lovely world. So I'm going to go ahead and explain some of the best practices we have in inventory. Inventory happens to be one of the largest assets on your balance sheet. It really has the most transactions flowing through it, multiple modules integrating together into it. Thus, it does require more care and feeding to keep it on track. There's some critical points and important ideas here. Posting dates are critical within the inventory module and any module that actually integrates with inventory. It helps you allow for proper reconciliation. You should be completing your inventory transactions in the proper transactional sequence, which would mean purchase order receipts should be completed before we actually try to invoice or ship an item to the customer. If for some reason you do not do that transactional sequence, we could be causing some other issues within our inventory module that I'll explain a little later in the demonstration here. We always want you to review your journals and registers for accuracy, and we want you to complete or suggest very highly to complete your reconciliations on a regular basis. It's easier to reconcile inventory on maybe a weekly basis than it is on a monthly basis. You have that many less transactions that you have to try and figure out if they were accurate. We do have some daily suggested practices. Always complete your receipt of goods and post them all the way through to general ledger. We want you to complete your shipping and invoicing transactions and post them through to general ledger. And update any inventory adjustment transactions on a daily basis that are needed. Then we're moving on to our monthly transactional suggested processes. We would like you to possibly create a company backup just before you do any of your reconciliations, or it could also assist you if you don't have time to do your reconciliations immediately. If you took a backup of the company code at month end, you would be able to retain that information. Verifying all receiving is completed and updated, along with all of our shipping and invoicing. Perform our negative tier report adjustment utilities, which I'll also be going into later in the demonstration. Run the remove zero quantity costing tiers utility. Again, I will be bringing up that in later on. Performing your physical counts and updating them. Physical counts can be completed on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, or even just an annual basis. Reconciliation of your inventory reports to general ledger, and performing your period end processes for inventory. We're going to move on to our negative tier process. The negative tier adjustment. Negative tiers are again, caused because you could sell something or invoice a customer for an item that you really do not have the quantity on hand within the system. Now, that could be an error just because of the way transactions were previously processed, or you actually could have made a mistake in a previous physical count, and the system may think you do not have any on hand, or you have a negative tier, but you might really physically have something out in the warehouse on hand. The negative tier adjustment will actually show you all of the negative tiers that are in your system. And then doing the complete adjustment, it does actually take a positive tier if one is available and applies it to the negative tier. If for some reason you run the negative tier process and the adjustment and you still have negative tiers, you will have to take care of those with an inventory adjustment transaction. Removing zero quantity costing tiers from inventory. This can assist you with having a zero quantity on hand, but then it has a cost actually on the tier itself. Now, there's two ways to remove your zero quantity costing tiers. One is through an adjustment process if it actually does have a cost extension on the tier. And the other one would be to remove the zero quantity costing tiers from inventory, but that utility only allows you to remove zero quantity costing tiers if the tier does not have an extension. Before doing this process, we highly recommend you create a company copy in another company code and test the actual utility and verify that the results are what you're going to desire at that point. We have a couple different ways that we can perform physical counts within the system. One is through physical count entry, and one is through count card entry. Physical count entry is utilized when only one person is going to be entering in the counts. Count card entry is allowed to have multiple end users entering in on what you call is a count card. After the count cards are entered, then we can transfer it into the physical count entry, where then you can be provided with your variance report and see all the different variances between what you counted on hand and what the system thought you had on hand. Freezing the inventory before you do the physical count entry takes a snapshot of everything that is in the system at that time. Once you freeze your inventory, you can continue doing invoicing transactions, shipping transactions, inventory adjustment transactions, purchase order receipts, or returns, but those quantities and those transactions are actually calculated after the physical count has been updated. With that, if you're completing a physical count entry and you freeze your inventory today, and tomorrow you ship something out and receive another goods, the quantity on hand yesterday is then added to the receipt of goods, and the ship quantity is actually subtracted. Again, after the inventory is the physical count is updated through to the inventory module and general ledger. If there were any unposted transactions done before the freezing, you would also need to adjust your count sheets to reflect those transactions. For an example, if a sales order invoice is entered in the system and it's sitting in a batch and not posted, you will need to add those quantities back to your count sheets to enter into your physical count like you actually had them on hand. If there are any transactions that are done between employees counting and you actually updating the physical count sheet, you really don't need to worry about those. Inventory knows to adjust those after updating the registers. So how to perform physical counts? We would set an accounting date. We would check for no data in our physical count variance register. We would open up our inventory module, enter or access our physical count worksheet, and we have some options in there. We can either just print our worksheet, we could print and freeze our items, or we could simply freeze our items. There are many different ways to sort your physical count worksheets. You can sort them by items, you could sort them by bin locations, you could select a range of items, a range of product lines, or a range of warehouses. So you don't have to, when you complete the physical count, count your entire inventory. There is an inventory cycle field within the inventory management area where you can assign a 1-digit code and you can run your physical counts by those codes. We want you to back up your inventory files and print an inventory valuation report, even if it's just a paperless office. This is a good comparison before you freeze to where you're going to be after you actually update the physical count. You do want to count the actual quantities that are in stock and record them on the worksheets. And then you're going to enter those actual counts into physical count entry or count card entry. Once you're completed with your entry, you will run your physical count variance register, which will provide you with the quantity on hand when you froze, the quantity you counted, and any variance in between those quantities, along with the variance extension amount if there is one. When you update that, it's going to ask you to print the daily transaction register. This part of it will only update general ledger. The physical count variance register itself has already updated your inventory module. We'll move into month-end reconciliation. There's a couple different things to think about when you're completing the month-end reconciliation. There are a couple different reports that are in the system. We have the inventory valuation and stock status reports. These reports are not date sensitive. These are perpetual inventory reports, and really the information on these reports are as of the moment you run them. These reports should never be used to reconcile to general ledger. The trial balance and transactional detail reports in the inventory module are date sensitive and use the same date posting as the general ledger does. These two reports should be used to reconcile to the general ledger. Of course, as with any reconciliation, you may encounter situations where the trial balance report and the inventory does not balance to the corresponding general ledger. It could be simply because you're using the wrong reports, or it could be because we have things that have been updated in incorrect periods. The trial balance and valuation by period reports use the IM period posting history table. This table contains the beginning balance, the period change quantity, and the period change dollar amounts. This should match the detailed transaction report if you run them both for the same period. If you find that you have some inconsistencies or out of balance amounts, these reports could be run far into the future to capture any future period changes when you're comparing with the stock status, the valuation reports, and your general ledger inventory accounts. The detailed transaction report is actually utilizing the IM item transaction history table and provides the detail for the trial balance and the valuation by period for the same periods. Our valuation report uses just the IM item cost table. This is only what is on hand at the current time. The stock status report uses the IM item warehouse table. So as you can see, all of these reports are using different data tables within Sage and have different uses and dedication for the different tables. So some of the factors that could cause your inventory reports not to match: turning off integration with the general ledger or from any other module that posts to inventory, connectivity lost, or errors and hardware malfunctions during an update from a module register causing entries to be lost or incomplete or just completely out of balance. Clearing the daily transaction register instead of actually posting it to the general ledger can cause your subsidiary module to be completely out of balance with general ledger history. If we're posting to wrong accounts, for an example, if we have a miscellaneous item set up or a miscellaneous charge that actually has an inventory account assigned to it on the accounting tab, these should never be assigned to the inventory account. They're not considered inventory items. If for some reason in inventory management and our product line maintenance, we have the wrong account assigned, maybe in our COGS account, we actually have the inventory account assigned, this would be incorrect as well. Or if somebody was posting some direct cost or invoices within the accounts payable module, and they think, I have this vendor invoice and it's for inventory items, so I'm going to send it to the inventory account. This would also be incorrect. One way that you can look for those is if you're in the general ledger account itself and look at the source type of the module registers and AP shows up, you could question that transaction. We could possibly have decimal precision rounding issues. Possibly if we ever restore some files and we don't restore the entire mass directory for that company code. Editing of data files using utilities. If we don't post in the correct the correct versions, there were prior version issues with the 4.4 versions, and I know that I think almost everybody on the meeting today is above that version. We shouldn't have to worry about those old version issues anymore. Areas to look at when you are reconciling the inventory reports to the common GL accounts. Look at areas where posting accounts are required. Again, that would be the product lines, miscellaneous item setups. If you're posting by warehouse, you could look at it through the warehouse maintenance area. You would just want to verify that everything is set to the appropriate GL account. If we needed to look at information in detail to figure out our out of balance issues, we could use our hard copies of our registers and journals, the daily transactions, to verify that the entries are not missing from general ledger. We could also use the GL detail by source documents to reconcile any transaction posting back. Purchases clearing is also part of your inventory. We suggest that you actually reconcile that at approximately the same time you're reconciling your inventory. Purchases clearing is an unvouchered payable account, if you would like to call it that. It's when you receive a good and you have not invoiced it, it's going to go to your purchases clearing account and be listed on your purchases clearing report until you actually complete that receipt of invoice. The purchases clearing account is assigned to each product line in inventory management underneath the general ledger account tab. It should be a liability holding account, and it reflects the inventory received, as I stated before, until the invoice is posted in purchase order. The purchases clearing account is credited when the goods are received and debited when the invoice is received. Rebuilding of sort files within the inventory module, the sales order module, or the purchase order module will only help you keep your quantities on order and your quantities on hand versus your costing tier information in line with each other. It does not hurt to rebuild your sort files. We have some clients that rebuild their sort files on a daily basis. We have some clients that only rebuild their sort files on a weekly, maybe it's a monthly. We have some clients that have never had to rebuild their sort files. This really depends on how many transactions and how many users are integrating with the inventory module at one time. When you rebuild your sort files, you always want to rebuild from the bottom up. So you would rebuild sales order and purchase order, then inventory management. And it does ask you some questions when you rebuild these sort files, whether or not you would like to recalculate some of the information in these modules. Recalculating the information is what is actually correcting those comparisons to become back in line with each other. When it asks you the question for inventory, do you want to recalculate committed lot serial quantities? We suggest you click yes, and it's going to search through the following of the files for data entry records containing lot or serialized items. It's going to go through invoice data entry, transaction entry, return of goods and invoice entry, material requisition issue entry, receipt of goods and invoice entry, and bill of materials production and disassembly entry. If there are no records that are containing the lot serial items found, then the committed cost detail files are cleared. When you are asked to recalculate within the open purchase order quantities, this is actually going to only look through the purchase order entry files. When it's asked to recalculate within the sales order module, it's only looking at the sales order entry files here. Again, rebuilding sales order and purchase order actually corrects items on order or quantities on order within the inventory module itself. So we have, over the years, came up with some other ways within Sage to assist you with something, things that actually cause issues within the inventory module. One of the easiest ways is the Business Insights Explorer views. These views are very customizable to your individual custom needs. There are multiple BIE views underneath the inventory module. We have an item view, we have an item transaction view, and an items quantity by warehouse view. We have previously customized these for several clients. one being called items with negative quantities on hand, one items with quantity and no unit cost, and then we also have a comparison of cost BIE view. So I'll just take you over here to the standard item by warehouse, item quantities by warehouse view. I apologize. And you can see that there's a lot of information in here. We've got the item code, the description, the warehouse description, quantities on hand, quantity on PO, quantity on SO, quantity on back order, on work order, quantity required for work order, quantity in shipping, average cost, and total value. If you know anything about Business Insights Explorer, we can filter by any one of our fields. We can group by any one of our fields. And we could do custom filters as well. So previous to our meeting today, I've set up a few of ours that we've discussed. So let's look at our cost comparison view. So here I set up just the item code, our item description, our warehouse. We have a quantity on hand here. We have our last cost, our average cost. And then I calculated a field, the last unit cost less our average cost. We have our standard cost. And then I calculated our last unit cost from our standard cost, and we can see the difference there. And then our total inventory warehouse value on that item code. Very quickly, I can look at this, comparing my last, my average, and my standard, and see the variance amounts between my cost fields. Standard unit cost within the inventory module does not change based off from standard Sage programming. This is a manual entry. So someone is entering in the standard cost and could possibly enter in the wrong number. If you're valued at standard cost, that could be a mistake that someone had entered in the wrong total. So it's always good to compare that to your last total unit cost, which is actually calculated based off from the receipts that are going into inventory. If you're valued at average cost, you can also compare that against your last total unit cost to actually see the difference between your averages as well. We can go ahead and take a look at our items on hand with no unit cost. This can actually assist you with items that have been issued or shipped that do not have a last total unit cost, that should have a cost. If for some reason you see an item in your BIE view with no last total unit cost and it needs to have a last unit cost, there's some other functionality within BIE where you can right click on the item, go to the tasks, and launch your item maintenance and fix your last total unit cost. One more view to show you, which is our negative quantity on hand. We talked a lot about our negative tiers. This way, viewing the BIE view before you go into your negative tier process at the end of the month can also assist you with recognizing transactions that were completed inaccurately. Again, shipping or issuing before actually receiving the goods. Again, from here, you could also drill down into the item maintenance area where you could actually access the transactions or enter in a transaction through inventory adjustment and correct the negative quantity. Well, that went a ton faster than I ever thought I'd be able to get through that. And at this point, I can open up the floor for questions. Did we receive any through the chat, Kelly?
Nothing in the chat. Check yours. Some people send them private. Kelly, if you just click on chat. I think you did a great job.
I got one that said, I can say that again. Do I want to say everything again, or was there something special, Nancy? How do you manage inventory when you have 40,000 items? Well, by using some of the suggested tools that we suggested for you today, the BIE views are probably going to be one of your best friends at that point, because you're going to want to watch exactly if the inventory has negative quantities on hand, or items without unit costs, or costs that just don't make any sense in between your last cost and your average and your standard. Absolutely, anytime. Any other questions?
Well, if anybody does have any questions that they don't think about here, feel free to reach out to Kelly. You'll get her contact info with a follow-up email after this session. And on that note, huge thank you to Kelly for her presentation today. Thank you so much. And of course, to all the attendees for taking time out of your busy day to come learn with us a little bit more.
Thank you very much.
This concludes the Vrakas Blum Computer Consulting User Conference. We still have the Business Partner Hall open till the end of today. Tomorrow we'll be shutting that down and kind of moving it to a different place in our on our website. So play around in there, see what you can see. If anybody does need anything or has any other questions, feel free to reach out to either your favorite consultant, me, Joe, Katie. We're all here to help you out. So thank you again so much, and for making it such a successful virtual user conference this year. Hope to see you all live next year. Thanks so much for coming.